You know that moment when you tell yourself you are done with sugar, and 3 hours later, you are standing in the kitchen eating something sweet, and you cannot even explain why. That is not a lack of discipline. That is your brain's opioid receptors firing. The exact same receptor pathway that responds to morphine. Sugar hits a region deep in your brain called the nucleus accumbens, and it triggers mu-opioid receptor activation, which is a fancy way of saying your brain processes sugar through the same chemical machinery it uses for addictive substances. And every time you give in, your brain adapts. It dials down its dopamine receptors, the ones responsible for feeling pleasure and satisfaction, so that the same cookie or the same soda produces less reward than it did last month. So you eat more, and it dials down further. That is not a willpower problem. That is tolerance. The same tolerance a body builds to any substance it gets too much of. You are not fighting a craving. You are fighting receptor physics. And receptor physics does not care how motivated you are on a Monday morning. But here is what most people never learn. These receptors reset. Your insulin signaling resets. Even the taste buds on your tongue reset. And it does not take months. It takes 7 days, moving through 3 distinct biological phases. I am going to walk you through this day by day, phase by phase, covering exactly which system is shifting, why each phase feels different from the last, and why by day 7, the cravings collapse on their own without you white-knuckling through another diet. This is not about hacks or tips. This is receptor biology, hormone signaling, and taste physiology laid out in sequence so you understand the machinery and can use it. Let us start the clock. Days 1 and 2 are the hardest, and there is a specific neurochemical reason for that. When you cut sugar cold, the first thing that happens is not in your gut or your blood. It is in a small region deep in your brain called the striatum. This is where your dopamine receptors live, specifically the D2 receptors, the ones responsible for registering reward and satisfaction. And if you have been eating sugar regularly for months or years, these receptors have been slowly dialing themselves down. Think of it like a volume knob. Every time sugar floods your brain with dopamine, your brain turns the volume down a little so the signal does not overwhelm the system. Fewer receptors, less sensitivity. The result is that the same candy bar that used to light you up now barely registers. So you eat 2, then 3. That is not greed. That is a brain trying to hear a signal through receptors it has deliberately muffled. When you remove sugar on day 1, that low volume does not instantly correct itself. Instead, your brain is now sitting in silence. No sugar coming in, and not enough active receptors to get a satisfying dopamine hit from anything else. This is withdrawal. Real, measurable, neurochemical withdrawal, headaches, irritability, fatigue that feels bone deep, cravings so loud they drown out every rational thought you have about why you started this. These symptoms peak somewhere between 24 and 48 hours, and there is a second layer most people never hear about. Sugar does not just trigger dopamine, it activates mu-opioid receptors in the nucleus accumbens, the same receptors that respond to morphine. When you stop sugar, you get a low-grade version of opioid withdrawal layered on top of the dopamine crash. Here is how clearly this has been demonstrated. Researchers gave sugar-dependent rats naloxone, the drug paramedics use to reverse opioid overdoses. The rats immediately showed classic withdrawal symptoms, teeth chattering, anxiety, tremors from sugar. So when you are sitting on your couch at hour 30, feeling like the walls are closing in over a cookie, understand that your brain is processing a real chemical absence, not a fantasy, not a preference, an absence. The action enduring days 1 and 2 is blunt. Cut all added sugars and refined carbohydrates at once, not gradually, cold. The reason is that tapering keeps the reward system partially activated. Every small hit of sugar resets the clock on receptor recovery. It is like trying to quit a drug by taking a smaller dose every day. The receptors never get the silence they need to start rebuilding. Sleep as much as you can during this phase. Drink more water than feels necessary. Both of these directly support dopamine receptor recovery. And hold on to this one fact. The peak is 48 hours. It does not keep getting worse. By the end of day 2, the loudest part is behind you. But the dopamine reset alone is not enough. Because there is a second system that has been driving your cravings this entire time. And it has nothing to do with your brain. It lives in your blood. When you eat sugar, your pancreas releases insulin to pull glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells. That is normal. But when you eat sugar constantly, you get repeated massive insulin spikes followed by a crash. Your blood sugar drops below where it started. This is called reactive hypoglycemia, and it creates something brutal: false hunger. Your body just received plenty of calories. You do not need more food. But your blood sugar plummeted so fast that your brain gets an emergency signal saying you are starving. That desperate, shaky, I need to eat right now feeling after a sugary breakfast, that is not real hunger. That is your blood sugar lying to you. By days 3 and 4 without added sugar, this roller coaster starts to flatten. Fasting insulin drops. Your blood sugar after meals rises gently and comes down gently instead of spiking and crashing. And here is where meal composition becomes critical. Every meal during this phase needs to be built around protein and fat, at least 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal. The reason is specific. Protein and fat trigger cells in your small intestine called L cells to release a hormone called GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1. GLP-1 does 2 things. It slows down how fast food leaves your stomach so you feel full longer. And it sends a direct satiety signal to your hypothalamus, the part of your brain that controls hunger. That hormone, GLP-1, is the exact same one targeted by semaglutide, the drug sold as Ozempic and Wegovy. Those medications work by mimicking what your gut already produces naturally when you feed it protein and fat instead of sugar. Protein also triggers a second satiety hormone called PYY, peptide YPY, which reinforces the same fullness signal through a different pathway. The result by day 4 is unmistakable. Hunger becomes calm, predictable. It shows up at meal times and it waits. The frantic, urgent, drop everything quality of sugar cravings fades because the false emergency signals have stopped. Your blood sugar is telling the truth now, so the brain is quieting down. The blood sugar is stable. But there is one more system that needs to reset, and this is the one that makes the whole protocol stick. Your tongue. You have sweet taste receptors on every taste bud, built from 2 proteins called T1R2 and T1R3 that lock together like a clasp. When sugar hits them, they send a signal to your brain that says, sweet, eat more. But just like your dopamine receptors, these taste receptors downregulate when they are overstimulated. Chronic sugar exposure turns down their sensitivity, so whole foods, a strawberry, a carrot, plain yogurt, barely register on your sweetness scale. They cannot compete with candy bars and soda because your receptors have been calibrated to need concentrated sugar to fire. Between days 5 and 7, with no added sugar coming in, these receptors start to wake up. Their sensitivity increases, and something remarkable happens. A blueberry starts to taste sweet, genuinely sweet. Not sweet compared to nothing, but actually satisfying to the same reward circuitry that used to demand a brownie. This is not imagination. Clinical studies measured detectable shifts in sweet taste perception within 2 weeks of sugar reduction, with people reporting subjective changes as early as 5 to 7 days. And there is a stranger layer to this phase. your gut bacteria are shifting too. When you eat a lot of sugar, you feed bacterial populations that thrive on it, certain species of firmicutes that ferment sugar for energy. These bacteria do not just passively wait for food. They actively send signals up the vagus nerve, the long nerve connecting your gut to your brain, telling you to crave sugar. They are feeding themselves through your behavior. When you stop eating sugar, these populations shrink. The vagus nerve signals quiet down. The bacterial voice in your head that was whispering, "Eat something sweet," starts to go silent. By day 7, 3 systems have recalibrated. Your dopamine receptors have started to upregulate, so normal pleasures register again. Your insulin signaling is stable, so hunger is honest. And your taste receptors are sensitive again, so whole foods satisfy the sweet-seeking circuitry. This is why day 7 feels so different from day 1. You are not white-knuckling anymore. The biological drive has changed, but here is what you need to understand about sustainability. This is not a permanent cure. It is a reset. The new state holds easily as long as the inputs stay consistent. But a single high sugar event, one binge, one day of going back to old patterns, can measurably reduce D2 receptor availability within hours. The tolerance comes back fast, not because you are weak, because receptor desensitization is rapid by design. That is why the phrase "just one treat" is so misleading. One treat is not a reward, it is a receptor event, and it can restart the entire cycle you just spent 7 days breaking. The good news is that maintenance is passive. You are not fighting cravings anymore because the cravings are not being generated. You are not resisting sugar because berries taste sweet now. The system sustains itself as long as you do not flood it again. Think about where you started. You believed that every sugar craving was a personal failure, a test of willpower you kept losing. Now you know what it actually was. 3 biological systems all screaming for sugar at the same time. Dopamine receptors too numb to feel normal pleasure. Insulin crashes sending fake starvation alarms. Taste buds so desensitized that real food could not compete. No amount of motivation was going to override all 3 at once, but you do not have to override them. You reset them. Cold cut the sugar and refined carbs on day 1. Build every meal around at least 25 grams of protein and healthy fat so your gut releases GLP-1 and PYY, the hormones that make hunger calm and honest. Survive the 48-hour dopamine withdrawal, knowing it is the defined peak, not the beginning of forever. And by days 5 through 7, let your taste receptors finish the job. Once a strawberry tastes sweet again, the system sustains itself. The only thing to guard against is the reintroduction spike. One high sugar event can knock D2 receptors back down within hours, not because you failed, because that is how receptor physics works. Protect the reset for 2 to 3 weeks while the recalibration stabilizes, and after that, maintenance is passive. Your body is not broken, you are not weak. These receptors, these hormones, these taste buds, they all evolved for a world where concentrated sugar did not exist. The protocol does not fight your biology. It returns your biology to the state it was built for. Remember the opioid receptors from the beginning, the ones that made sugar feel like a substance you could not quit. Those same receptors are the reason 7 days is enough. They upregulate, they recover, they let go. The same neuroscience that built the trap is the neuroscience that opens the door.